All right, well, I think we'll go ahead and get started here. Come on in. Oh, I scared him away.
If you didn't, my laugh just did.
I saw Leanne walk by. I'm like, oh, come in. Great. Well, thank you guys for joining us for the panel today. You can probably do the math here. We're down one panelist, which is unfortunate. She's on her way, but she won't be here for another hour or so. So if you're interested in more discussion on Peru, I can introduce you to her later. She's phenomenal, and I'll go through that in my remarks. But all right, a couple more people coming in. I'll call them out. Daniel, we're getting started. All right, great. Well, thanks everyone for being here for this panel, and thanks especially to the Climate Action Reserve for allowing us to host this really important topic with an incredible cast here in front of you that I'll introduce in a moment. I'm thrilled to be moderating today's panel on advances in addressing deforestation at jurisdiction scale, with a specific focus on actions at the subnational and national levels in Latin America. I'm Jason Gray, as you can see from the sign. I currently serve as the project director for the Governor's Climate and Forest Task Force, which is a coalition of 43 states and provinces from 11 countries focused on addressing deforestation and fostering jurisdictional transformation to a new forest economy at scale. The GCF Task Force, just a quick plug, was actually founded in California by then Governor Schwarzenegger, and our member governments, some are represented up here today, are very actively watching what's going on in the California space and vice versa. So I think this is a really timely discussion to see what lessons can be shared, what leapfrogging can happen to drive innovation and success, hopefully. Before I introduce our incredible panelists, though, I'd like to just situate us on why this is such an important topic for discussion and for consideration both within the carbon market context and hopefully more broadly than just the carbon market context. We all know that the world's tropical forests are critical for all of us. They provide an incredible amount of ecosystem services. They are essential for the people who depend on them directly and indirectly. Indirectly is like everybody, all of us. They have incredible levels of biodiversity that are under threat. They help regulate the climate, just to name a few of the reasons why we should all care about the resiliency and protection of tropical forests. Deforestation of tropical forests results in a serious threat to all of these attributes and also to the global climate system. And in some areas, we're approaching a tipping point beyond which it'll be very hard, if not impossible, to reverse, and the threat and impact on climate will accelerate. So this is critical. The world continues to lose tropical forests at an alarming rate. Last year, the World Resource Institute put out a report estimating that about 10% more primary tropical forest was lost in 2022 than in 2021. So we're going the wrong direction. If you calculate that into an emission source, that's about 2.7 gigatons of greenhouse gas emissions, which is equivalent to the emissions from the country of India. So that means tropical deforestation is the third largest emitter if it were a country in and of itself. In the face of this stark reality, that the economic incentives driving deforestation, the continued large-scale clearing for agriculture and cattle, extraction of oil, gas, gold, timber, cobalt, et cetera, continue to threaten the lives of communities and of the entire planet, we do have some bright spots and some areas of hope. So I don't want to just leave you with a doom and gloom today, but I want to express the seriousness with which hopefully the global community will start to address this problem more. We're going to hear from some of those success stories from our panelists today, as well as some of the challenges that are still faced by their work and also more broadly. We'll hear about the urgent need for investment, funding, sustainable financing models, which is something that the GCF Task Force and many others and our panelists have been working hard to create partnerships with funders, with carbon market participants, with private sector actors, with communities to drive finance at scale to incentivize and recognize actions to protect these critical ecosystems. Our latest initiative from the GCF Task Force was to release a call to action at COP28, seeking to partner with all of you, with other partners, to really make more flexible access to funding sources. And we issued a $1 billion call to action to co-create mechanisms in our regions to really focus on what is needed on the ground, what is really needed to transform these economies. And just for a sense of scale, for those of you in the finance sector, there's something called the New York Declaration on Forests from 2014. Every year there's an assessment of how far governments and companies who've signed that declaration are making progress. And it's estimated from their most recent report that public financing to protect tropical forests is about $2.2 billion a year. That same report said that's the cost of 2 soccer fields in the EU, actually in the UK, sorry. And about 1%, less than 1% of what's really needed to address this area. So it cannot just be public sector. You know this, you work in this field, so it has to be private sector, but it has to be both. In the face of this, national governments and subnational governments and the communities they serve, they know their realities best. They know their needs, they know their opportunities, and they're most able to experiment with action, real-time policy innovation to take these realities into account. This includes partnerships around the development of bioeconomies, investment in environmental governance and enforcement. There's some of you in the remote sensing space who are very actively involved in this here. Recognition and support of indigenous rights and indigenous and local stewardship of territories and lands, project-based and jurisdiction scale carbon market strategies. All of this is in the strategies these places are working on. So with that as an introduction, let's turn to the true experts on this topic that are on the panel today through the work in their countries and in their jurisdictions. And I'm thrilled to introduce all of them, and I'll just quickly introduce each one, and then I'll move to a question and answer phase where I will ask a question of each of them. I will be pretending to be Fabiola Munoz, so I'll ask myself a question and answer it, and then we'll get some audience participation. So first we have, to my left, Silvia Llamas, who is the coordinator of operations at Pronatura Sur in Mexico. And Pronatura and Silvia serve as the coordinator for the Governor's Climate and Forest Task Force for our 7 member states in Mexico. Silvia has a degree in biology and a master's degree in environmental studies and social development. She's worked for 15 years in institutional strengthening, planning, supervision, and coordination of projects, and very closely with state governments and community partners on jurisdictional strategies for RED and other initiatives. To her left is Ana Moreno, who is the climate change analyst at the Ministry of Environment for the government of Panama. Ana is an architect with a master's degree in business administration. She's worked as part of the climate mitigation department at the Climate Change Directorate within the ministry, and is currently coordinating the development of a national carbon market for Panama. Not a small task. To her left is our Climate Action Reserve star here, Amy Kessler, who's the director of Latin America for CAR. Amy oversees the development and implementation of the reserve's protocols and programs throughout Latin America. She manages stakeholder engagement, consulting services, technical assistance to support climate policies and carbon markets throughout the region. Amy graduated from Middlebury Institute of International Studies with a master's in international environmental policy and in business administration. She also has a Bachelor of Arts in biology with a concentration in environmental studies from Kenyon College. And I'll still introduce Fabiola Munoz. She will be here later today, as I said. Fabiola is our director for the GCF task force for our 7 member departments in Peru. Fabiola also previously served, she's a lawyer with a master's degree in social policy and is previously the Minister of Environment and the Minister of Agriculture and Irrigation for the country of Peru. So we have some really rock stars working in this space throughout our region, and I'm thrilled to introduce them to you all today. And please, in the Q&A and then afterwards, follow up with them. They have an incredible amount of wealth of knowledge to share, and we have an incredible need for more partners. With that, we're going to start some Q&A. All right, Silvia. So several states in Mexico have been advancing in their jurisdictional approaches over the last year, including through sector-specific zero deforestation certification programs and submitting proposals to the LEAF Coalition, which uses the Art Trees standard, and Christy is here from ART. Can you share what that process has been like from the state's perspectives?
Hi, Jason and everyone. Thanks for the invitation. And well, as Jason mentioned, I work with the states that are part of the GCF task force in Mexico. There are 7 states, and all of them were part of the RED Plus early activities in Mexico back like 10, 12 more or less years ago or more. Probably. They were all part of this intense period of trying to build RED Plus in Mexico, and it was a very interesting path for the states to get capacities and also to to build the state strategies for what they would be doing on deforestation to lower deforestation and degradation in their own territories. So that was a very intense period, and all that period was led by the federal government in Mexico. And unfortunately, when we changed the administration 6 years ago, well, the strategy and priorities of the national government changed. And for the states, that was also, really a shocked and crisis period, but also a good opportunity for states to take the lead on all those strategies they built. Since having a period led by the national government, they were just like kind of waiting to see how that was aligned, directed. And after that, they had to find their own way to get capacities, partners, funding, to implement and take to the implementation road all those strategies they had built way before. So that way, states like Chiapas and Jalisco are building now strategies to have a better livestock sector related to deforestation-free value chains. Also, Jalisco working with the tequila sector and having now a tequila deforestation-free on the market. And recently, Oaxaca has also started a process to work with the agave mezcal sector in that direction. So actually, that change of direction for REDD+, I think was a good way for states to get the power, get capacities, find many actors interested in supporting them, and also to find a way of getting back the REDD+ path with the LIVE Coalition. And that was a new opportunity to just get to the point they were before and start filling in the gaps to move forward to hopefully a mechanism that could work in Mexico. We have 3 states on the road. Jalisco and Quintana Roo have already approved concepts by R3s. They are working on the registry. We hope Jalisco could complete that registry this year, hopefully. And Yucatan is about to send its proposal to the LIVE Coalition. And actually we see this LIVE Coalition process as an opportunity to complete, the path and to fill in those gaps. We don't know what's going to happen with the market, but for sure states are gaining a lot of knowledge and capacities and even positioning themselves into the strategy and the platform this type of mechanisms bring. So even if it has been challenging, I think it has also been good for finding new opportunities.
Thanks, Silvia. First, to plug for the Zero Deforestation tequila, it's really good, and I think there are some bottles of Don Julio that they've started marketing, and the former Secretary of Environment for Jalisco will bring them to every meeting he goes to. So, but I think that a really interesting parallel within the GCF task force structure is for federal countries like Mexico, Brazil, the U.S., the ability of states to advance and continue advancing even in lack of or changes of federal policy, I think is really important for the climate discussion and hopefully for some certainty in investors that there's different layers of political will to help de-risk your investment strategies. And Mexican states are really demonstrating that in spades. Thanks. I think we'll come back to that in the next set of questions. But let's move to Panama. I am married to a Panamanian, so Panama holds a dear spot in my heart. Anna, We've known each other for quite some time. I know you have a very small but mighty team at the Ministry of the Environment, and you're working with the Climate Action Reserve on adapting the Mexico Forest Protocol into the Panamanian context. How do you see recent adoptions of this protocol as advancing Panama's climate mitigation goals?
Thank you, Jason. It's a pleasure for me to be here, and thank you, Climate Action Reserve, for the invitation. First of all, we do think the development of this protocol, Panama Forest Protocol with the Climate Action Reserve, is a step towards the right direction. It has helped us to really implement the national carbon market, specifically the second component of the national market. The second component is the national offsetting system. This is a system that includes a standardized process. It will include a registration, then the projects that register themselves in that national registry will have to go through a certification process with some prioritized and approved accreditation mechanisms, such as Climate Action Reserve, and they will have to use an approved protocol from the government so they can receive those carbon credits, and of course the Panama Forest Protocol is one of them. So we are expecting that we will have a lot more of projects being developed using this protocol, and with this we will strengthen the second component, the national offsetting system. Is the first protocol that we adapt to national circumstances. So we are very excited to begin this process of developing new projects using this protocol. And also receiving high quality credits from this protocol. And also this protocol includes some activities such as agroforestry, silvopastoral systems, restoration and reforestation, and also small and large urban forest. Those activities help the country to increase the forest cover. We understand that the country has a lot of potential, and also Panama is a carbon negative country. So with these activities, we are hoping to maintain that status and help us to meet our climate targets as a country. Also, I would like to mention that in our nationally determined contribution presented in 2020, we include a compromise, a commitment for the forestry sector of the restoration of 50,000 hectares at the whole country. So we are expecting that some of the projects that use this protocol will help us to meet that target, specifically the projects that stays at the domestic level. And also talking a little bit more about the registry that I mentioned, that is a part of the second component of the market. It's a national registry. We are expecting that all type of projects developed in national territory will go through that registry, not only the projects intended to participate of the national domestic mechanism, but also the projects that are intended to sell to international markets. The idea of this registry is that it will allow the government to have a clear track of what is happening at national level regarding national climate action. And that registry is going to be integrated in the National Transparency Platform. In there, we will also have a module for the follow-up of the commitments of the NDC. So our idea, we are not there yet, but that's an idea, and we are hoping that it's going to be real very soon, is that we link both registries, both modules, so one can feed the other with information. So if you register your project in the National Registry for compensation projects, and it's a sectoral project, that sectoral project will help to meet the sectoral targets of our NDC. It's a very good idea. We are expecting that this will happen, and it will make our lives so much easier. And also, not only the protocol has helped us to meet kind of directly this climate targets, but also all the process of developing and adapting this protocol has been a great experience for the whole team. We have a lot of lessons learned, and Amy can know about it. We went through together. So we learned a lot by developing and adapting this protocol, and we identify some things that we need to work on to make the market more smoothly for the nation. So we had to review our national regulations, and we realized that we need to create some new regulations that will allow the market to work as we want to. Also, the importance of participation rules regarding the activities that can participate in the national market, which activities can participate in international markets. That's something we have to work on. Also, the relevance of safeguards, social and environmental safeguards, and to have a participatory process since the beginning is also very important, and we realized that while we were developing this protocol. So with this protocol, not only we are expecting to meet directly our climate targets, but also to strengthen the foundation of the whole market.
Great, thanks, Anna. I just wanted to follow up with a quick question for you. I've had the pleasure of being able to be part of some of that process, and I know many of the people in the room here have as well. I'm looking at Jean-Yves from Quebec. How important has it been? It's a leading question. I'm a lawyer, so I'm asking a very leading question. How important has it been for Panama to be able to talk to other markets that have been in existence for a while and to governments like Quebec, California, Mexico, et cetera?
It's been super important, and it's been very enriching for us. We are a young country in terms of carbon markets, so we are learning. The technical team that is developing the market keeps on learning every day. This is a very complex issue, and it has a lot of years happening around the world, and Panama is beginning this process. So we have been working with a lot of governments and jurisdictions. We started working with California a lot. That's where we met Jason, and they help us a lot guiding through the first steps of developing a market. We also had conversations with Mexico and with Colombia at the beginning to learn what they were doing and to see which mechanisms apply better to the Panama context. And also with Quebec, we have developed a strong bond. They have helped us with more technical matters regarding forest, but also we, with Quebec, are working in the carbon pricing in the Americas. That's a platform for exchange of knowledge regarding carbon pricing instruments. And in there, we have make bonds with other countries that are actually going through the same process that we are into. So it's been very helpful. We have learned a lot of other countries, of other experiences, and we actually are trying to replicate good practices that other countries are doing right now.
Thanks, and I don't mention that just to toot the horn of everyone who's working together. I really mention it because one of the questions that we hear in the GCF task force context, in the discussions with Panama and many other jurisdictions, is how do you do the due diligence? You have to comply with your own laws, but for this room, for this audience, how do you do due diligence as a country that's newly trying to establish a market, whether that's a regulated market for compliance purposes or for other purposes? How do you assess actors in that market? There's a lot of bad actors, I think, that descend on places. So how can governments, as they start out, learn lessons from those that may have had that experience already? How can they learn lessons from you all, the good developers, the good marketers, the good registries? So I think this space that the Climate Action Reserve provides is a great intro, and I would just encourage all the panelists and all of you to find ways to really partner together to leapfrog again and go faster, because we know we need more speed and more ambition. Thanks, Anna. All right. I'm sort of talking to Amy as a Pan-American. So we've got Mexico, we've got Panama. I'm going to pretend to represent Peru. But Amy, I know the Climate Action Reserve is heavily involved not only in Panama, but other places like Mexico. And you're leading the way on working with governments throughout the Americas in developing carbon offset protocols. We heard from Anna on the Panamanian context. How do you see these protocols helping achieve jurisdiction efforts and community efforts to reduce deforestation?
Thanks, Jason. I think first, from the perspective of the reserve, we really think it's really critical to adapt the protocols to the context of the jurisdiction. So really first understanding what is the regulatory framework, what are the important laws, considerations, what's the local context. Land tenure in Panama, it's so distinct and different from Mexico or from Guatemala or from any other countries. So really understanding that framework from the start and building that into the protocol development work. So with that, we really think it's important to develop a technical group of people from the jurisdiction working closely with the government, of course, as a primary stakeholder, but also working closely with NGOs, working with the forest owners, the communities, agrarian lawyers from the jurisdiction, et cetera. And so working with those actors we're able to then design protocols that actually function for the jurisdiction and actually function for the actors in that jurisdiction. And we see much greater social benefit and inclusion of the local actors in that way. So for example, in our Mexico Forest Protocol, we now to date have 150 registered projects and another 92 listed projects. About 91% of those are communally owned lands, and 100% are developed by Mexican-based project developers. That's really something I'm super proud of, but also it's really unique in the carbon market. You guys all know very well carbon markets in other areas, and that's not something we really see. And I think that really speaks to the way in which this model, by adapting the protocol to the jurisdiction, to that context, and building the capacity with those actors in the jurisdiction, enables this greater participation and social benefit. And of course, that doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of work in the actual protocol development process. It's kind of a bit slower in the actual build-up because we have to evaluate all this context for the jurisdiction. We have to kind of become experts in these jurisdiction, or really lean on the experts, right? So by building that stakeholder group, bringing those experts to the table and having those very challenging discussions, and then making sure that the protocol is fully aligned in that way. We also then, in Mexico, held many, many trainings, and we're looking forward to doing that in Panama as well. But we went to basically everywhere in Mexico and trained NGOs in the communities and, foresters who were just now learning about carbon markets, but they wanted to understand, okay, well, how can I participate? And now they're project developers with 20, 30 projects and registered or listed or whatever. So it's really exciting because it's that growth and building that capacity within those actors. We also have weekly calls with all the actors in Mexico. I think that's also really, really critical to have that connection, that ongoing communication with them. And then I think the other really important piece in this all is in the protocol development, having the capacity to include the social safeguards directly into the protocol. So of course, when we're thinking about designing something that's for a specific jurisdiction and how this develops or builds, supports community efforts and the jurisdiction's efforts, we have to ensure then there's free, prior, informed consent. We have to ensure there's ongoing dialogue, communication, transparency with the actual forest owners and the communities themselves. And so we build that into the protocol. That's not like an add-on. That's not optional. It doesn't get a plus. It's required. It's part of the protocol. Every project has to do it. They also have to elect someone from the community to represent the project, and that person has to be this is really technical. That person has to be CC'd on every email sent between the project developer and the reserve and the verifier and the buyer and anyone. So that there's someone from the community that's involved at all times, all along the way, and that's really critical to us. We also really, we built this program all in Spanish, right? And we're kind of now at this point where we're realizing, okay, we also have to speak English sometimes. So we're grappling with that, I'll be honest. We're grappling with, okay, well, how do we now communicate this to the English-speaking actors? Because we focus so much on making sure that the community members were involved and they understood. So that's a growth area for us. And yeah, not to say that we're going to continue to improve things, right? This is always an ongoing process. There's always ways in which we can take in information as we receive it and then update the protocol or update our processes, whatever it might be, to make sure that our protocols are having the impact that we strive for them to have.
That's great. I'm struck here by the importance of taking the time. And I think often, at least in the context where I've been involved in hearing concerns on carbon market issues, is it's folks that don't take the time. Do you feel, and again, a lawyer leading question here, the critiques that have happened over the last year and a half or 2 years, or even longer, often it's the same people making the same critiques, but do you feel like that process that you've just outlined, the process you've worked on with communities in Mexico, and maybe it's the translation issue of not having it in English, do you feel like that's understood by folks that are making the critiques?
Critiques? What critiques? I don't know these critiques. I think this is an area where we can continue to improve upon our communication and make sure people are educated as to the rigor and the processes and all that work that goes into it. I think I mean, you guys all have an amazing opportunity right now because there's actually, a lot of project developers and the community members are here from Mexico right now. I think someone told me 20% of the participants from the conference are Mexican this year. I haven't fact-checked that, so I don't know. But let's roll with it. That's kind of amazing. So, I think as we hear these stories out there, these critiques of concerns that community members aren't involved, or they're not informed, or they're not the ones making the decision. Here we have people that you can actually talk to today to say, okay, well, how is your project functioning? What is the impact of your project? 'Cause this is what I oftentimes see with these critiques. It's not actually the community members that are saying these things. It's other actors that have different agendas. And again, not to say there's always good projects and bad projects or whatever. There's always, ways we can improve things. There's always that process. But I think we take it as really, really critical that we have that dialogue constantly with the community members, and so we know directly what is happening. And anytime I hear anything, because I hear things, we immediately, have calls and dialogue and that communication to make sure that the community members are involved and they know. And it was, they approved this. Yes, we understood this. It's completely clear, and et cetera. So I think, taking the time is really, really critical.
Thanks, Amy. All right, my final first round question is for Fabiola, so I will answer for that one. The question is, the GCF Task Force jurisdictions in Peru, we have 7 member departmental governments in Peru. 6 of them in the Amazon region have formed something called the Mancomunidad Regional Amazónica, which is the regional Amazon Commonwealth of Peru, to support their jurisdictional approaches to development and to reduce deforestation. How does this coordination approach work, and what do you see as key advances for reducing deforestation? All right, other hat. So the coordination, and this is, Fabiola provided these responses to me, so I'm not just making this up. The coordination is always a challenge, and I think you've heard that from all of our panelists. But within the Peruvian context, within this Commonwealth, the Mancomunidad, they're doing their best to ensure that the 6 member jurisdictions of this Commonwealth are aligned in policy and action. And they've done that both through their membership within this Governor's Climate and Forest Task Force, but also in really creating this block, a single voice across 6 different governments for certain policy actions, in particular around development and deforestation reduction plans. For example, the 6 regions have developed a regional low emissions rural development strategy, and 7 working groups that all 6 of these governments participate in, with civil society participation, indigenous participation, local communities. And they've been confirmed to address common issues in these working groups related to connectivity, both ecological connectivity, but also communications connectivity, bio-business, like a bioeconomy approach, the really strong indigenous agenda in Peru. There's a group of indigenous organizations called the Grupo Peru, which works hand in hand with the governments. They don't always see eye to eye, but the Mancomunidad really works hard to have a space where that dialogue is constant, like Amy was saying, among other different agendas that they're working on. Last year, or maybe it was 2 years ago, the San Martin government held a technical exchange together with this Mancomunidad to really highlight for other jurisdictions, and some of you were there as well, what types of industry, what types of small-scale kind of local land ownership initiatives they're pushing forward as a block. And that's really kind of the strength of this Mancomunidad, is learning to work together as regional governments, as governors and their teams in this block. And that's also helped them articulate their positions with the national government. And Fabiola stresses here that it's not perfect, it's still evolving, but it's a really, really great step forward. And we're excited to see kind of Peru as this block across the Amazon really moves forward on policy alignment, cohesion, and action. So thank you, Fabiola. All right. Let's go to the next round, and then we'll come to audience. So Silvia, I pulled you into a couple meetings yesterday on California-specific issues on pending legislation, because I think some of these will eventually translate into discussions in other countries. As you listen to the debate around carbon projects versus jurisdictional programs versus other types of funding mechanisms, what do you see as the primary challenges and opportunities for GCF task force states in Mexico going forward?
Well, Jason, yeah, it was very interesting to to hear yesterday about the situation in California and all that it's been negotiated and changed. Because, well, in Mexico now, in general, not only for states, but in general, the carbon markets are having a hard time since there is a regulatory instrument that the Mexican government is working on to have it published before they change the administration in December. And what I see is that instrument is the result of what Amy is saying. Well, this lack of information, lack of education, and I heard yesterday in that meeting, lack of education a lot, and all those critiques without the information based, that we are now at this stage in Mexico. But I also see a big opportunity in the upcoming change of administration, because this has been just an approach, a position of a very specific administration. So this happening at the end, I see it as a good opportunity that we can negotiate differently with the next administration. And also, like, all the support and the feedback that the different actors around the markets in Mexico are giving to all this process, we feel it has an opportunity to stop the legal process now, and that we don't end up the year with a formal published instrument, and that we can keep working on it with the next administration, and obviously in a wider process of putting again the strategy of carbon markets on the correct step, and that we can build from there to a different perspective and a different situation in Mexico. So even if it's really challenging now, and I know most of you are aware of this, I think having a new administration very soon, it is a good opportunity to build on a different direction.
Thanks, and I think that political continuity, or the substantive continuity beyond administrations, is a challenge that every government faces. And I think some of the efforts in Mexico and other regions for the GCF task force, where even as governors change, the civil servants, the NGOs, that collaboration, that ecosystem that's been created is vital for the climate agenda, the forest agenda, really for moving forward. And I think we can learn a lot from what the states in Mexico have been doing. Really quick follow-up question for you on jurisdictional versus project. Is that a construct in Mexico that is a challenge? Do you see projects fitting in within jurisdictional strategies? Kind of teeing off of Amy's remarks earlier.
Well, it depends, for sure. Well, the thing with projects in Mexico, it's now super crazy because everyone wants projects in Mexico and in the Yucatan Peninsula, to be more exact about that. So the Yucatan Peninsula is full of project developers. We don't know who is who. It's just really crazy, and obviously that's part of the point that we're having these regulations being built now, that we have a lot of trouble in the field with these carbon projects. So there are a couple of states that are also building their own strategies, not to regulate the voluntary carbon market, but to have better elements to guide the people in the communities. And even if states don't have the capacity to just work with every single community and see what's going on and what they are negotiating, what they are signing, have a general approach that can guide them and help them take better decisions. Because as Amy was saying, there are some projects that really work with the people and are worried about what they work and what they build with the people, but there are some others that not. So there are some states facing more trouble with projects that are obviously including that part into their strategies. There are other states that are trying to build before they have a problem, so they are still exploring what could be a good strategy for that. But for sure, and even on the path to something like R3s or LEAF or jurisdictional mechanisms, they will have to link both scenarios for sure.
Great, thanks. Anne, I have a very similar question for you. I know you're developing in Panama ways to incentivize reductions through a carbon market approach, including for forests and mangroves on blue carbon. What do you see as the future of these efforts, and how do you see forest projects and broader sectoral REDD+ efforts in Panama fitting together?
Since the beginning of the development of the national market, we noticed a big interest in the forest sector, including mangroves. Everyone wants to develop a project in Panama's forests and in Panama's mangroves areas. We include it in the forest protocol with the climate action reserve, so we are expecting that we will see more projects, more mangroves projects and more forestry projects in the country. But we do have to take into consideration that a great part of the forest lands and mangroves areas overlap with comarca lands and with state lands, also with protected areas. And in those parts of the country, we usually have some informal land tenure arrangements, so we don't have like a formal owner of the area. And we start questioning who owns the land and who can develop a project there. So also we have a forestry law that goes back to the 90s. And that forestry law talks about who owns the forest and who owns the mangroves and who can develop there a project. It doesn't talk about carbon directly, but it does add a layer of complexity for us in the carbon market. So we realized that we needed to create some process to facilitate the development of this type of projects, forests and mangroves, but not just only to facilitate the development of projects, but also to assure that the communities living in there were going to take into consideration while developing the project, and they were going to receive positive impacts coming from those projects. And also we are working on an executive decree, specifically for mangroves. The idea of this executive decree is that to create a process, a step-by-step process, so the people interested in developing mangroves projects will have to go through the whole process. They will have to present some requirements to the Ministry of Environment, and once they meet all the requirements, then the ministry will give them the approval to start working on a project, on a mangroves project. And the idea is that when they already have that approval, they will have to go through the whole registry for offsetting projects from the national market. They will have to go through the whole certification process with the accreditation mechanisms approved by the government and the methodologies approved by the government. And then they will be able to receive some carbon credits. But we are creating this whole process just to assure that we are doing it right. This is just in the making. We are not ready yet with the decree, but we are working very hard on that decree. And also, we are thinking we will have to do something similar for forest lands, especially those lands that are on comarcas areas or in state lands or in protected areas. We are not talking about private-owned lands, but the other type of lands that are more complex. We will have to develop a type of process in which we can incentivize the development of projects, but also to assure some benefits for our own people. And talking a little bit more about the second part of the question, Panama presented a REDD+ strategy on 2023. It's a voluntary scheme, and it has a national level. This strategy has been led by D4. D4 is the Forestry Directorate in the Ministry of Environment, so it's a separate directorate from the Climate Change Directorate that is developing the carbon market. So it means that we have to coordinate inside the government before defining some links in both schemes. We do think that they both can work together, but we need to figure out how. We need to start coordinating with the four before we realize how can we make it work between the REDD+ strategy and the carbon market. And also I wanted to mention that we had a commitment in our NDC regarding the implementation of the REDD+ strategy. Right now we just published it. It hasn't started, but the commitment is that in 2025 we will have that strategy being implemented in the country. So we have a short amount of time to coordinate with them, but we sure see it happening. We think we are with the same objectives. We are trying to increase forest cover. We are trying to stop deforestation and degradation. So we will make it work.
I love the optimism there, and I know you will. It's great. Amy, I'm going to move to you. Through your work with governments, what exciting opportunities do you see in the next year in this sector?
Thanks, Jason. First, I'd love to see some projects in Panama. Obviously, we just published the Panama Forest Protocol in January. I believe we have our project developer here that will be developing the first project, Brett, back there. So I think they're working on developing an agroforestry project, waiting on their submittal form any day now. So hopefully, yeah, we'll be getting some projects in Panama. We also just published a Guatemala Forest Protocol in January as well. That both processes were about a year-long process through this, what I just described, right, working very closely with the stakeholders and the jurisdiction. So hopefully we'll also be seeing projects happening in Guatemala. I think those are more likely to be improved forest management, whereas in Panama we're likely to more see restoration, reforestation, agroforestry. Mangroves would be fantastic. So that's all very exciting. I think we're going to, of course, continue to see growth in Mexico as well. And generally, I think, of course, in the voluntary carbon market, we continue to see growth, of course, which is always exciting, particularly in the forest sector. It leads to a lot of amazing, larger environmental and social benefits. Jason, you spoke to the huge environmental benefits that forests bring, and I think I've highlighted the importance of including the communities and how that can provide larger social benefits. But that also provides unique challenges. Forests have really unique challenges in ways in which we have ongoing monitoring and verification of the forests, just the dynamics of a forest. It's ever changing, right? So really thinking about uncertainty and baselines and additionality, these all are really challenging, very unique things to nature-based solutions, even more so forestry, right? So it's always our role as a standard to ensure then that our protocol provides the greatest rigor in our methodologies to reduce this uncertainty, and we provide confidence in the market that all credits are additional and are real and are high quality. At the same time, of course, right now in the market, we're seeing these trend in other actors and evaluating different protocols and different projects. ICBCM now coming, of course, and trying to establish what is high quality in the market. And I think they're all really grappling I think the market, I'll say, is just really grappling with particularly the forest sector, right? So I think some of the other sectors, it's a bit easier to say this is additional, this is good, this is not good. In the forest sector, it really feels like a very challenging. It's just challenging. So all these, conversations are happening, and then what I see, what really, again, because of this ongoing dialogue that we consistently have with the communities, is then they're getting the back end of this, and they're trying to figure out, well, what are all these people? Who are all these new actors? Why are they evaluating my project? What's going on here? How can I communicate with them? How can I, get involved in feeding them the information they need so that they can appropriately evaluate and provide the information to the market? Because, of course, there's a role here. There's obviously a role and need to assessing what is a good project and what is not. But, of course, it just is really critical when we're thinking specifically in the forest sector to incorporate the people on the ground in that equation. So I think, yeah, that's just a really, really unique challenge. And then I think that as Silvia highlighted, in the same time, we're also seeing an interplay of the governments wanting to get involved as well now. So seeing all the growth and development in the forest sector and forest projects in the market generally, but specifically I think it's really the forest sector. Governments are wanting to also now come in and step in and say, well, okay, well, what's our role in this? Which is really fantastic. Like, invite them, please come to the table. But I think also needs to be in a way in which there's a communication with the actors that have been involved, right? So how can we, registries, then work with you? How can the project developers work with the government? And then really critically, again, the communities to ensure that their voice is being heard as all these bigger picture dynamics are happening. I think that's just a really, really unique and critical piece to make sure that the forest sector can deliver the amazing climate and social opportunities that we hope it can.
Thank you very much. And I think that role on government, I used to work for the California government, so my view is that the voluntary government market is incredibly important for innovating, for developing standards, for moving that forward. There may be a link then to pushing compliance programs, and whether that's the role or the direction the government wants to go, I guess from the California experience, it does increase value, and it also increases transparency in most places. So it's really exciting to kind of hear that growth potential, and also just the interest of governments. And I think from what we're hearing from Panama and from the Mexican context, and the Peruvian, which I'll mention in a moment when I'm Fabiola again, is the role that governments need to have to protect communities and their people. So the convergence of these in terms of that role for government, ideally that provides some additional certainty for investors. I know some folks are nervous about governments getting involved, but from my perspective in California, that really made the California program more robust.
Jason, may I just also, I think Panama is like the ideal example of how it works really well. Like Panama, you guys worked very closely with the registries, you worked very closely with all the actors, you ensured that the comarcas were at the table. Like that was a critical role you played, and that's, I think, the plus that the government can bring to the market.
Thank you. I'm going to be Fabiola. I'm going to be myself and then Fabiola, and then I'm going to turn it over to you guys. We have about 9 minutes left. So my last question for Fabiola is, there have been carbon projects and attempts at developing jurisdictional and indigenous-led RED programs in Peru for many years. What opportunities do you see in the coming year to push these forward, and what role do the regional governments play in this work? New hat. So Fabiola says, the regional governments have wanted to play a more active role for a long time. Unfortunately, there's been some gaps in terms of jurisdictional boundaries of the national government versus the regional governments. Now there's an opportunity through this Commonwealth, where they're speaking as a bloc, where the Amazonian Commonwealth for the Peruvian jurisdictions can have a stronger negotiating power with the national government. There's been some problems defining the terms of nesting, which I think we're alluding to here, of how projects can fit into jurisdictional approaches. And there's been some early initiatives in Peru in particular on RED projects, some good, some bad. And today we're really discussing how can that advance through these regional government structures with alignment or pushing a little bit the national government. A lot of dialogue is needed to define complex issues such as the ones we've been discussing today, but it's even better for the national government to have this negotiating bloc to speak with rather than one-off jurisdictions. In addition, there are multiple efforts underway in Peru through a coalition of these indigenous organizations that I mentioned earlier that work closely with the regional governments and the GCF task force. And this includes proposals for assessing indigenous-led RED efforts across their territories. So there's really great potential for that and great interest. I think as Fabiola comes in later today, I would love to introduce you all. I know there's interest in Peru from some in the room and some at this conference, and I think there's really good growth potential there in a good direction. All right, so I'm back on my Jason hat. Thank you all for those answers. We've got 8 minutes left now. If there's a question right here, let's go to the audience.
Thanks so much. Jose Castro from Canopia Carbon. Super interested conversation, and a common question and a question. Both the GCF and, in this case, CARB have been following for many years now, and there are processes that have, as you were saying, they're being designed from the Global South for the Global South with a lot of participation from not only subnational but also local stakeholders. And I was involved in these Red Plus readiness processes for many years, and they're really good processes. And what I feel that is a risk right now is, and I think my question is how we manage this. There's so many changes that the market is now requiring at a pace that, from my point of view, is unsustainable. I mean, at the end, we all want additionality. For me, all these things are not high quality. It's the bare minimum additionality that we should discuss, and certainly in forestry, Nafolo is not straightforward, as Amy was saying. But I think that the pace at which we're requested to move is unmanageable, because these are not environmental problems, they are social problems. And coordinators and people on the ground that are dealing with and doing these activities are just not coping with this at the pace that is required. So my question for all of you is, how do we do this in a way that we don't, like, despacio porque tenemos prisa, no? I mean, we have to do it quickly, but at the same time, if we break the liga, I don't know how to say that in English, but if you break
The process,
then it's game over, and then building that trust again is going to take many years. The other question, Anna, you were saying about how in Panama you're integrating the carbon registry of markets with the NDCs, and it's such an interesting process because in Mexico we haven't quite get there. We have a lot of challenges, but my question is, how are you thinking on integrating the ITMOs with the NDCs, and then if carbon markets are linked to your NDCs, how are you, because that mechanism is definitely going to be like a very interesting to replicate in Latin America.
Thanks for the questions. Who would like to answer those really easy questions?
I can.
You want to go first?
Say some thoughts of the first question. It's actually, I had the same question when Jason pointed out the thread of my initial comments was the need to take time. I was like, yeah, it really is, but also the market, we're not giving ourselves time. I think right now the buyers we have urgent deadlines. We have to turn this around. We have to do everything's now. And there's so much pressure right now to solve everything. We can't invest in this project unless we have 100% certainty that everything is perfect, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it feels like an impossible situation for the communities who are on the ground trying to do the good work. They're like, we're out here, we're in the forest, we're implementing these actions that we're supposed to implement, we're doing the inventory, and then we're getting hit by a million different ways, and then revenue's not coming in because it's getting held up because of decisions we're making, the registry, or because of wherever it's coming from. And it's very challenging dynamic. I don't really have an answer. I'm just saying that I get it. That's really, I don't know. I think I don't know, maybe we just need to give ourselves a bit more grace in the market.
I don't think I have an answer either. And what I would say is that's how working with communities is, because the other thing is they are worried about eating and surviving. They are not worried about the carbon market or the world, so I guess we didn't anticipate all this coming, because I guess capacity building would have been a good tool to prevent all this you're seeing. But I feel like capacity building is never late. So I guess we need to work capacity building. And I feel linking or nesting this type of components of strategies in the territories with the main objective of the strategy could work. Because then people are working and learning and progressing on their own objective and path, that is eating and surviving, and then just bring the component of carbon to the game. It's gonna be slow for sure. I'm sure it's gonna be slow. It's what's happening in the Yucatan Peninsula now. Everyone wants credits, so people are like, okay, just explain to me what's going on, and if it's money, I'm in. But I feel capacity building, like having money for capacity building would speed something up. I don't know if at the speed we need it, but for sure it would make better results.
I might also just say, I think it's almost capacity building on the buyer side, though. Like,
Yeah.
I think the communities are
I see that
there.
too.
Like, they want to do this. It just takes time. Like, we just need to give them time to be able to, come in on board and learn and all do these things. But it's the other side of things that perhaps doesn't necessarily understand the dynamics of how it works
Yeah.
with the communities.
I was just going to say that.
Different levels.
And I'll come to Anna last for the easy ITMO question. I was just going to say some anecdotal discussions. I won't name the governors or the communities or the indigenous leaders. I've heard this from every single level of the partnerships within the GCF, that we've spent decades in some cases designing programs.
Yeah.
We've not seen financial results in the scale we need yet. My term is up. I need to get reelected, or my successor is going to need to get elected. So that political reality, I think, is not often understood by the buyers. It's great to see ICBCM, VCMI expanding into that space of having discussions with governments and communities. I don't think it started that way, and they've heard this from me and others. I think that's great that's going in that direction. But that is the reality, the political reality on the ground, whether there's a government program or not. The governments are trying to look out for economic growth. The communities are looking out for their concerns and their growth. And if the buyers are driving the discussion, you lose that link that's been there for a long time. So having those discussions together, the capacity building, I think on both sides of the market piece is important. I also think it's important for this community to look beyond carbon markets. So carbon markets are an important tool, but we need more. We need more tools. We need more components. Yeah. All right, Anna, ITMO question.
Okay, so Panama is doing a lot. We are participating in a lot of mechanisms. So we are trying to take one step at a time. We are starting with a national registry. And our idea is that this national registry will allow the government to track all the activities developing regarding climate action, mitigation action. We are going to track the activities below the national carbon market, also the NDC follow-up, but we are thinking about including also activities below 6.2 and 6.4. So the idea is not to control those activities and put rules out there, just to know what is happening. That's our first step. What is happening in the country? What activities has been developed and are willing to participate in international mechanisms and national mechanisms. And from there, we are going to build some participation rules or requirements just to keep transparency and real climate action happening. The idea is that we eventually will have requirements and participation rules for each activity, so we have a clear idea on what activity can participate where. In the national carbon market, in Article 6.2, in Article 6.4, or in the voluntary carbon market. That's our idea, but we are taking one step at a time.
As is everybody. So I think Panama's really leading the way in a space where no one's answered these questions yet. But I think we may have time for a very quick question. I was given the okay. Back there, we got one more.
Oh, now it's launched.
Hi there, this is Vinicius. I'm a journalist at Quantum Commodity. I have a question for Amy, actually. Speaking about jurisdictional projects in Latin America, Brazil is coming with the carbon law now. We know Brazilian states are developing their own projects, their own jurisdictional law, Pará, Acre, and so on. One point from Brazilian authorities and also other countries, Brazil has been asking for methodology specifically designed for the country. It's a huge country, its own realities. Is Climate Action Reserve planning to come with methodologies specifically for Brazil or for Latin American countries? And how do you see those requests from authorities, from governments? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So the way the Reserve is really viewing this is by leaning on actors or stakeholders from the specific jurisdiction to come to us and say, okay, there's a need for a protocol here. We can sit in our office in Los Angeles or wherever we might be and, come up with a game plan and strategic and understand that there's markets and there's need. But really we're leaning on those actors to come and say, like, look, we need a protocol. We have demand. We have a need. There's a gap here. What's out there already isn't working for us, and this is why it's not working, and this is is why we think the Climate Action Reserve model is going to be, provide a better outcome. So we are having those conversations with people in Brazil. We've had a number of different actors approach us and look at potential for protocol adaptation for the jurisdiction. To date, I would say it's not scheduled. It's not on the books, but certainly something we continue to assess and we'll continue to evaluate as we evaluate various different possible protocol developments.
And I'll say the 9 jurisdiction states of the Brazilian Amazon, or the 9 states of the Brazilian Amazon are members of the GCF task force. And I think one of the roles that we see ourselves playing, we writ large, is making sure everyone can access different actors so that they know each other, they know you guys, and vice versa. Leverage us to see if you need a conversation with one of these jurisdictions or the folks that work there. But very good question. I think we're a little over time, so it's lunchtime. I want to thank the audience for your great questions. I'm sorry we didn't get time for more. And most importantly, I want to thank our panelists for an excellent presentation, and thank you.